You're watching the front row. We are looking at the unrest in especially public schools across the country as the number of schools and with dormitories being burnt down continues to rise. The ministry has said students will be heading to half-term in a week's time. But then we're looking at what are some of the deep-seated issues that we're dealing with here. How can we come up with long-lasting solutions to this recurrent problem? And we asked you on our tweetable question on who or what is a missing link in this recurrent wave of unrest being witnessed in schools. And most of you have been following the conversation. So let's take a look at some of your thoughts. Caroline Kisiengani says there are several issues. One, student discipline. We all agree that students have been left to figure out how to behave. There are no channels for handing down discipline. Everything goes. So does banning of schools. So two, why do we want to catch up after COVID? Catch up what? Caroline Kisiengani poses that question. Where are the students hurrying to? They should just have picked up where they left in March 2020, she goes ahead to say. Jasper Ondimo says, I agree with Mr. Otundo on abolishing boarding schools. It is sad that the government is not even giving consideration to this noble idea. Generally, there's a massive leadership gap in the Ministry of Education. The next president will have a lot to fix. Thank you, Jasper. Lawrence says, unrest in schools is due to overprotecting children where pupils think no action will be taken against them. Also, it is due to decolonization where new principals impose new rules that might be unfriendly to the community. Let's take a look at two more thoughts before we get back to the discussion. Amon Kibet says, I'm a product of boarding school. It is very easy to deal with this. If the government wants to deal with this issue, just go to a school and engage some self-proclaimed group of students, also known as Wasani, he says. They'll probably find a long-lasting solution. And finally, Tiger Oscar says, too much pressure to get classroom grades, less co-curricular activities, deny the kids a chance to grow in a society setup. So looking at some of those thoughts that Kenyans have there, one has raised the issue of discipline. Even as we look at the bigger picture and the long-lasting solutions here, we cannot deny the fact that we are confronted with an indiscipline problem, Mr. Milemba.
Thank you, and our viewers are very correct. There are a number of things they have spoken about. Discipline, which should be a shared responsibility between everybody, the community, the society, the teachers, and even the parents themselves. That is really one thing. Then communication. In schools, we had done a little bit of democratization of schools. I don't know if it's going on. And we went to the next end of where now prefects are elected. This was to give a chance to students to have leaders who can communicate. I hope it is still working so that there's good communication between the administration and the students themselves. The issue of catching up, which our viewers have spoken about, is important. The pressure must be really slowed down, and I think I've spoken on that, so that we don't expect the same results within this period of, or the circumference of COVID. Overprotection is talking about how possibly the parents are treating the students. And I think this is a group of people who believe that we should bring back the cane. But we had spoken on this as a union. We don't believe in the cane because it's no longer...
It's not a conversation we should be having in the 21st century.
Yeah, we should never have it. So for us, in fact, if you bring it, we shall ask for more money for our teachers to do the caning because we were never trained to administer the cane. But I love this one, the issue of delocalization. We really must check out, because when you brought your statistics, they were very good. In 2016, the number was very high.
239.
But you noticed it was reducing.
To 60s.
It went even almost to 7 at one point.
7 was in 2020.
But then now it's rising again. We have to check the issue of the delocalization. Because when we receive new principals in schools and they bring new rules and new ways of life, this may actually disrupt the way the school was operating. Look at Chavakali High School. That's a revered school in Western. Built by Harambes, contributed by the mamas who sit on Chavakali market selling vegetables. That was a Harambes school. The money is the sweat that has built Chavakali is from a very poor families around Chavakali, Bunyore, Vihiga, and the environs of Western. But now we open it up. We say it's a national school. do those business of delocalization. And now we have just banned that school. The wealth that has been wasted in Chavakali is massive, and the communities would be crying about that. So let's actually revisit many of the policies in the education sector, not only that one, but many others, which could have affected the operation in schools. And the boarding section is another dangerous place, because there's a lot of money running within the boarding sector. Who are the suppliers? How do they feel when sometimes there are changes in who is supplying? And that's what we talked about. Let's not just focus on the student alone. What is the role of other players around the school? Those are issues around the boarding sector, which I think needs to be addressed. Kakamega High School, I heard it also had a challenge. But the last fire in Kakamega High School was 1979, my friend. So what is really happening? So I think our viewers are correct that we need to make our schools be as local as possible, because the community interested is then brought into the schools. Why are students not burning their homes in the houses? It's because of what I call ownership. They possess their homes, they revere them. The local communities revere the schools, and they will never burn them. They would rather walk away of school and not burn the school. But now, having opened it that wide, it can just be burned and it goes away. So I think there's an area of things that needs to be done, but all the same, national dialogue to look into this issue with the focus of getting a long-lasting solution.
How do we deter students from engaging in what a lot of people are terming criminal activities, destruction of property in their schools? Even as we look at the bigger picture, as I mentioned earlier, how do you deter them, and many of them, from engaging in these activities in school? Because it is, at the end of the day, a criminal activity.
Sure it is, and I want to say that what the viewers are saying here are very incredible things. But I want to say, as we even deter and place rules and all that, we must all agree that we need a 21st century parent, a 21st century teacher, a 21st century thinker, policy implementer. We must think in the modern way. We must think in the way the things that are changing fast today. Now, students, when they get to school, the students are as a result of a community somehow. And I'm sorry to say that one of the things I will be keen to know, the students who have burned the school, is where they have come from. And you are likely to be shocked that most of them are not likely to have come from that community, because most of the schools were set up best to solve the problems within the community. And you can look at the current wave. It's a lifestyle which has kind of hit more of the national schools. So we must investigate what is it that is causing that with national schools. That means, is it possible, even if it is boarding, that we even curb the long distances students travel to go and look for quality education? I personally feel, Kisa, that there are radical things that should be done. Number one, we need to map out where must we have a boarding school. Number two, so that we begin to phase out boarding schools slowly by slowly. We also need to ask, what is the definition of the word free education? To me, I think I feel very hard, Mheshimiwa, when we keep talking about free education, and free is not free, because I have to pay some money. We also need to find out the issues about leadership transition. The principals of schools who've been transferred to these schools, what do they go in mind with? Do they learn the culture, begin to drive the school from the culture they find, or they just go there with the new rules? And some of them also could be going with the new rules to trigger something. Possibly they are not happy with the delocalization. There could also be teachers who are not happy with delocalization to such an extent that they don't want even to participate in student discipline. In as far as discipline is an issue, but realize that discipline is earned based on the society. So some of it could be monkey see and monkey do.
Monkey do.
And some of it could be an influence from where they get and say, look, I must belong to this group. So you become a peer, you are pressured to be able to act and do something. So my take is that when principals are being transferred into new schools, is there anything that happens with that transition? Is there any culture change and culture transition that takes place? Is there a time when they take even a whole month of handover, the leaving principal and the incoming? Do we have that session where it takes a whole month to understand He's just mentioned about Chavakali and many other schools that were built by churches and with a poor community. But now those are areas where the property is being destroyed. When we come to parents, I know of parents go to school, but I'll be saying that many times parents have meetings in school. They are not meetings, they are lectures. Teachers stand this side and they tell parents. The other side. And parents respond. So they do not agree on amicable things that they need to work together. So it's a kind of a fight between this side and this side. That needs to be looked into.
Okay.
But as I finish, I think my point of emphasis is for us to understand the style the learner is taking in this era. You listen to where learners go to a principal's house and say, we want to go home. So we need to begin to address why is that happening at the moment? What is it that they want to look for back in the community? And back to my point, do we have this happening in day schools in this country?
Okay. We have about 5 minutes left, and I think we can use this to get the closing remarks. I'll give you a minute each, and I'll start with you, Dr. Wakiaga. So where do we go from here? It is already happening right before our eyes. Midterm coming next week. We've talked about some of the long-term solutions, but Mr. Omboko Milemba has also raised a very key point of competing interests in these very communities. Where do we go from here?
Okay, so for me, I'll just kind of wrap up with my, as I wrap up, I'll mention a few things. You asked about the learner. For me, the first thing, listen to them. We have to listen to them. We cannot come with this stick approach and always be like we are talking down on them and we don't want to listen to them. We have refused listening to them, and they have shown us that they have their own way of reacting, and it has not been very nice in most cases. But that should also be accompanied by creation of boundaries. They have to know that there are consequences to their actions. So the rules and the regulations have to be followed. But then, it's very interesting that when we are in these teacher training colleges and schools of education, we have all these rosy ideas of how to manage schools. And then when we get to the schools, I don't know, it's like all those things we learn in the universities and the colleges, they're just thrown out of the window. So when you talk about creating rules, how do we engage the students? How do we engage the parents collectively in the forming of these rules? So that when the rules are broken and there are consequences, it is very clear that this is something that had been agreed upon. The other thing is engaging the parents. Parents are not engaged. They are not engaged effectively. Even when you look at the PTAs, you find that some of the parents, and unfortunately, they are sometimes mouthpieces of the principal. So they're there to protect the interest of the principal rather than actually promoting the well-being of the school. So we have to look into that. And then also when we engage the parents, let us genuinely engage them so that they can be part and parcel of the running of the school. Listen to their views. And also, there are certain very successful private schools that actually make it a requirement that parents have to come and participate in the running of the school.
Thank you.
For me, those are some of the things that I think are really key in terms of making the school environment to be policy.
Thank you, Dr. Wakiaga. Mr. Milemba.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I think the other issue that needs to be checked are the teachers themselves. The teachers are working under very tough conditions now. Teachers never got their rightful pay increase because of COVID. The CBA that was supposed to be signed, the monetary CBA, was actually suspended. So we as unions are also grappling, handling a group of teachers who the law says that after 4 years, they are supposed to get certain increments in their allowances and salaries. They never got that. So the motivation of the teachers must also be checked. But that is also coupled with the much pressure coming from the employer on very many issues that are within the school sector to try and improve the sector. I wish that there's continuous dialogue between the sector of the employer and ourselves so that we reduce on the pressure that the teachers are actually facing. But finally, generally, let's reduce the pressure in our schools because education is no longer the sacred cow it was in 1963. Education does not lead to direct employment. Employment will be based on very many other factors. And I love CBC. Let CBC be welcomed.
Okay.
So let's reduce pressure in this.
All right.
Thank you.
Let me give you a chance to give us your closing remarks, Dr. Otundo.
One, I would just mention a few things, and thank you for this show. We need more funding for infrastructure to develop all the schools at almost bare minimum standards in terms of quality, so that we can have more scaling down on boarding schools. We need more funding and introduce an allowance for teachers who man boarding schools. There should be a special allowance for all teachers who are teaching in boarding schools, because they work almost 24/7. So they need to be more motivated. So that needs a consideration. We need activity-based parent-teacher meetings, community-based approach, where parents are coming in to do a community service with teachers together and students. So we have a session like, say, a weekend where parents come in, and students and teachers, and they just say, we want to clean our school.
Yes.
We want to ensure that the school environment is safe. We want to see what is around the school. That, to me, is better than the usual parent-teacher meeting where it is one-sided and one side.
Right.
Stop this issue of policies that are not aligned with research and implementation. So there should be funding towards implementation of some of the things that have been researched on. And finally, public-private partnership is important, so that we also are able to address the issue of moving away from schooling to having an education.
Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady. And I'll end it with a text here from Okech Stephen from Biwa, who says, KTN, as a teacher, I am happy that the government project of indiscipline in school is bearing fruit. No discipline at Ituweke guidance and counseling for the indiscipline. Let teachers teach and go home, in discipline to be handled by police officers. And someone says, causes of interest in schools, introduction of underground levies, and too much focus on dreams and remedial fee, but little return. So seems it is just a milking cow for principals and BOG. A lot of you. Finally, Geoffrey from Kapenguria says almost 80% of students are abusing drugs. Boarding schools should be abolished. Geoffrey, I would wonder where you got your statistics from, but thank you for watching the show. A lot of things have been canvassed here, so we shall continue to push on and see how this conversation continues to unfold and how schools behave. I am Akisa Wandera. Joining us tonight, Dr. Julius Otundo, who's a Dean School of Education at Riara University. Dr. Lucy Wakiaga joining us virtually. She's an educationist as well as a quality director and a senior lecturer at the Tengaza University, and Omboko Milemba, who's a national chairperson of the Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers and the Member of Parliament, Emuhaya. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us. Till next time, this is The Front Row. I am Akisa Wandera.